I do want to announce that Sand Hill Wildlife Area is having an open house on Saturday, April 28th from 10 a.m. to 2. And that's located in Babcock, Wisconsin. They've got a wonderful afternoon of workshops. One called The Sounds of Spring, a walking, hiking, stick workshop, a title about what are the barrens and why should I care, similar to like what are the grasslands and why should I care, the mobile citizen science, basics of photography, and the crane watch. So these are all things that are happening at the Sand Hill Wildlife Area, but I do encourage you to go to their open house at a minimum on Saturday, April 28th. It's with great pleasure that I'm going to introduce our next speaker. And Richard Breen is local here from Wisconsin Rapids. He's a lifelong science, nature, and insect enthusiast. Over the last dozen years or so, he's been providing wildlife, butterfly, and insect teaching resources and presentations to schools and organizations in Wisconsin. He has shared some of his insect photographs on bugguide.net, and his artwork has been featured in local galleries and shows. He's been contributing to a study of the monarch parasitic disease, OE, with the University of Georgia, Athens, since it began in 2006. This work led him to a deep and abiding love for the Buena Vista Wildlife Area. Yay! Its flora, fauna, and abundant insects life, especially monarchs. And for somebody who's been stuck on one of the Town of Grant roads, congratulations. Come on, Richard.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was just telling Lupe that I feel like I'm with a group like this that I'm preaching to the choir and a lot of things that I'm going to be saying. I should also let you know that I'm not an entomologist. I'm not a lepidopterist. I'm very much an amateur, and what I'll be sharing with you will come from the little bit that I've learned over the years. My background's actually in chemistry and computer science and electronics, so when I talk about chemistry, I do know what I'm talking about. And the electronics, I don't think we'll talk about that today, if that's okay. What we're talking about today, Frenchie and I will be talking about pollinators in peril. And much as the grassland bird species and species in general are threatened, we see that with pollinators as well. My focus is going to be on butterflies today. You'll notice that there are 3 butterflies that are featured in that top slide. The monarch on the left, the center one is the Carner blue, and the one on the right you may not recognize. That's the regal frit. The regal frit is found in the Buena Vista Prairie chicken area, but not very many, and the numbers have been declining very rapidly. And hopefully we can do something to get their numbers back. I'm not going to be talking about bees. Frenchie's going to be talking about bees, so that little solitary bee digging its way into the ground is not something I'm going to be talking about, but she'll talk more about that, I'm sure. And I'm not going to be talking about the soldier beetle as a pollinator either. I like all the little things. I think I took that picture out in Buena Vista, actually. You see those on the goldenrod a lot. This is just a fun thing. I like the hummingbird moth. This was on swamp milkweed that I grew in my garden one year. I had a clump of maybe 10 or 12 swamp milkweed plants that I had to tie up to keep them together, and they grew about this tall. And this one afternoon, my wife came in and said, "Come quick, come quick." So we had 3 hummingbird moths on that clump at one time. We actually have 2 of those species in Wisconsin. This is the snowberry hawk moth, and the other one is the Hemeris thisbe. Just a little bit different in its appearance. Isn't that a fun little creature? I just love it. I'm going to focus on just a few species of butterfly, not to do anything more than to keep the slide count down. I like all the butterflies, but we really need to focus today to get through things. This particular slide I call, "He's Not Heavy, He's My Brother." This is a very unusual thing. You will not see this in nature because monarchs don't lay eggs on their caterpillars. They just don't. But that is a monarch egg on the back of a monarch caterpillar, and that was in the unusual circumstances of rearing monarchs in large numbers and bringing a plant in that had a caterpillar in it to lay eggs on, and I didn't know the caterpillar was there. And if you've ever watched monarchs when they lay their eggs, they don't know where they're putting the egg. They curl their abdomen, sometimes underneath the leaf, sometimes on the top, but they can't see where it is. If their feet are on milkweed, they're happy. And so this gal was happy and misplaced the egg on this poor little caterpillar. I don't know what happened to the egg on the caterpillar. I can't answer that question. That's a frequent question. I just don't know. Hopefully it succeeded and the caterpillar did too. The thing to note here is that you recognize those stages, those life stages of the monarch. And you recognize that a monarch has to have milkweed. This next image was from another monarch aficionado that said, "Richard, it doesn't look like milkweed." Well, actually, it is milkweed. It's world milkweed, different species of milkweed, but it does support caterpillars. But we know that we need milkweed to have caterpillars, monarch caterpillars. And the life stages, you recognize the pupa, both when it's fresh and when just before it closes. And this is the same pupa for all three shots. And the other thing to note, of course, is that everything in life is eating and everything in life is eaten. And we don't think about monarch caterpillars as food for much, but actually on the left we see an Armacustus, which is a true bug that is enjoying its green milkshake that happens to be a monarch caterpillar. It was carrying it up a plant. So it's like, oh, not too much fun. The shot on the right came from my friend Janice Stiefel in Bailey's Harbor. And that is a native praying mantis enjoying a monarch butterfly. So there are some things that can eat them. There aren't many praying mantises in Wisconsin. You have to be along the lake to come across these. So that's fine. We notice immediately the beautiful blue of the Cardinal blue butterfly, and we probably recognize that it requires special habitat to survive. The oak opens and barrens, oak and pine mixed with a sandy soil and lupin is required for the Cardinal blue. And actually the Cardinal blue also requires ants, or is certainly helped by ants. The caterpillar is protected from predatory wasps by the ants. It's a very interesting relationship, and these kinds of relationships are very, very important for a lot of species. The regal frit that you see there on the left also has a particular host plant. Violets are the host plant for the regal frit. And I can't help but think that one of the problems that we have in Buena Vista Prairie chicken area is that we don't have enough violets. I was told by somebody that that I trust that the regal frit actually looks for areas where it thinks there are violets, and it sows its eggs, kind of bombs the area with eggs. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it sounds like it could be true. The regal frit has a very unusual life cycle. The egg hatches, and the caterpillar then goes immediately into leaf litter, and it overwinters in the leaf litter. And then in the spring, then it starts to feed, and then it goes through the rest of its life cycle. Each butterfly species has its own unique problems, its own unique requirements, its own unique associations with other things in nature. And so we can't say too much about problems at a global level, but there are some things that we can recognize. They're all specialists, or mostly all specialists. That means they require special food, they have special requirements for life. They have different kinds of survival strategies. The monarch, we know, migrates back to Mexico or other places where it's warm enough where it can survive through the winter, and then migrates north again. That probably is very good for the situation that it has with its obligate parasite OE, because it gets cleaned up as it comes north. We get several generations of monarchs, and the amount of the parasite that we see in the north is way less than what we find in the south. And the populations, for example, that live all year round on the Gulf Coast, almost all of them are infected with the OE parasite. But up here, of 100 or so samples that I took last year, I think only 2 showed any signs of OE at all. So it's a rather dramatic thing. The parasite doesn't kill the butterfly, but it certainly weakens it. Complex relationships. Just amazing to think that an ant could be important in the life cycle of the Carner blue. And actually there are many different blue butterfly species that have associations with ants. In fact, there are even some species that have problems that the parasitic wasp has figured out how to get past the ants. In France, there is a blue, like the Carner blue, that is protected as a larva by the ants, but it has the problem that the parasitic wasp has figured out that it can emit a hormone, a pheromone that drives the ants crazy, so they attack each other, so that it can still go into the ant nest, lay its eggs on the caterpillar, and get out without being attacked by the ants. It's like, wow. I mean, who could have thought this stuff? It's just amazing. So we have complex relationships everywhere, and everything in nature is food someplace along the line. I've had many, many monarch eggs that I've watched for one day and discovered they were gone the next, out in nature. If you've looked at all for monarch eggs, you may have found the same thing. I don't know what's eating them, but I know something's eating them. And it must be happening at night or something. It's like we've got stealth ants, or never figured out what it was that takes out those eggs. But I know that they are gone. Butterflies have been around a really, really, really long time. And one of the things that I think is important to realize is that the associations and the relationships in nature have developed over millions and millions of years. The oldest fossil that I've been able to find of a butterfly was found in China. It's about 150 million years old. And we have a lot of good reasons to think that butterflies are about that old. This chart is from a very recent publication, just this year actually, where some entomologists did genetic studies. I believe it was mitochondrial DNA that they were looking at to try and understand the phylogenetic relationships of different species. This kind of work has been done for a long time. There's one researcher in Denmark that's been noted for this work. But this particular, you can see the center is the beginning of all butterflies, and it's like, I don't know, 150 million years ago. And as you go out towards the edge, then you see the branching off of different species. So you think, okay, 150 million years is a really, really, really long time. And this origin is about the same time as we see flowering plants. So we're developing these relationships over a huge, huge amount of time. Here's a little bit closer look at one section. I'm sorry, I'm not using this mic very well. That shows the Lichenidae family of butterflies, which are the blue butterflies. And you'll notice that there's an ant there showing how many different species are associated with ants, or they have a commensal relationship with ants. Okay? I just thought you might find that interesting. I didn't know that we're that many. I'd done a little bit of paper research on the Karner blue and the work that they're doing in Indiana to try and repopulate the Karner blue in their, what do they call it? Sand, close to the lake, anyway. And they were talking about the importance of ants. Going back a long way, these are not butterflies, forgive me. They're one of my favorite species. I actually have examples of both of these species in the cases, if you look at those later on. I was interested in genetics and the divergence of species, and when you look at those two, you say, wow, they look like they should be closely related. They're Uranid moths. The Urania laelis on the left is from Central or South America. That particular one is probably from Peru. The one on the right is from Madagascar. And you say, well, wait a minute, how? But if you go back to the time of speciation, when this is happening, and look at the world then, you'll notice this is about 130 million years ago. This is what the continent positions looked like at that time. And we're seeing the early break of what was called Pangea, the circular landmass that preceded this breakup of space. And let's see, can I show this? Right there is where Madagascar is at that time. And you'll notice that South America and Africa are actually conjoined at that time. A little later, then we start to see the breakup of the continents, and at some point, we know that those species have to separate. What really intrigued me, though, was finding this. This particular species of Uranid moth looks like it's a mix of those other two. It's got the long tails and the bright colors, right? Unfortunately, this particular species is extinct. It was found in Jamaica, and the last, this particular specimen, the Urania slonis, was probably acquired by a collector around 1894. The extinction of this particular species tells us a lot about the things that we can and can't do. The Uranid moths are not unlike some other species of butterfly and moth, where their host plants are poisonous. And many plants that are poisonous, well, why would you think? Because, hey, I don't want you to eat me, right? And some insects have turned that to their advantage, like the monarch. They eat the poisonous milkweed, and as a consequence, they become protected from some predators. That's good for them. The plants say, hey, you ate my leaves, I don't like it, I'm going to generate more poison. And the Omphalia, I think is the name of the species that this particular moth feeds on. After one generation of being leaf eaten, it generates a lot more poison in the leaves, and the next generation cannot successfully feed on it. So they migrate from one patch to another. And we're pretty certain that what happened in the case of the extinction of this moth is that human development of one area of Jamaica wiped out a secondary patch of this host plant. So in one generation, or 1 year of migration around the island for this particular species, it was successful in having a brood in one patch, and they went for the next patch and it wasn't there. Sorry, it's hard for me to imagine such a beautiful creature dying out. Everybody recognizes that sign, right? One of my most loved places around this area. As Sharon said, I've been studying OE in monarchs out in this area now for 12 years. I think I'm one of the first, I think there may be 5 of us that were involved in the first year of that study. And that area is changing. And we're hoping that a lot of the species that we've seen dwindle can come back with careful management. I was just talking with Lori about possibility of a controlled burn out there, because I think we need it, based on what I've seen of plant change out there. The next slide is a species that is uncommon out in the Buena Vista Prairie chicken area. It's called the white-suited butterfly catcher. This is my friend Martha Kronholm. Martha and I spent many happy hours out there in Buena Vista last summer, catching mostly monarchs and looking at the beautiful flowers out there. She helped with catching. We also did a fundraiser for the Tribune project that needed fresh laying females to help us, and she was my helpmate. And the reason for the white suit is I don't like ticks, and there are lots and lots of ticks out there. And it turns out that a Tyvek suit is perfect for letting the ticks roll off. So if you don't like ticks either, a Tyvek suit, I know it's hot, it breathes a little bit, but it's really effective. When I go out by myself, I just feel change, but you know, I didn't think that was appropriate behavior if I was going out with Martha. So we wore Tyvek suits, and it worked. It's a fun thing to do, it really is. Okay. I know Bill already talked about this, but one of the problems that we have is the way that we've dealt with the land. This is kind of what it looked like in most of Wisconsin when the settlers first arrived. And here's a map of what the foliage looked like pre-settlement. We have this information based on the surveys that were done. When the surveys were done of Wisconsin, then the surveyors would take notes at every section mark. And as a result, we have a fairly detailed understanding of what the vegetation looked like in those early days. We even have more detailed information on what species were there. And Bill already showed you basically what the layout was for the grasslands, but this is what it looked like. And our current land cover is after the woods have started to grow back. We know that around the end of the 1800s and early 1900s, Wisconsin was pretty well clear-cut. And it's good that we've got a lot of that forest back, but it's still not the same as it was. Now what we see is patches of forest and a lot of farmland. And what happened after the clear cutting was conversion to farmland. And that was spurred by early internal combustion machines like this tractor, and has moved a lot more towards monoculture. And as Bill already told you, when you get into monoculture, you've got basically a desert. You've got a few things that will grow in that, and not a lot of bugs. Another thing that has contributed is when you do monoculture, you tend to get insects that like whatever you're growing. So you get a lot of corn borer in this situation, and other things that feed on corn. And as a chemist, I can tell you that we've been very, very willing and able to use our skill to develop particular chemicals that take out particular bugs. Here we have an early insecticide. You probably recognize it, DDT. It was first synthesized in 1874, and then it was discovered that it made a great insecticide. In 1939, Muller was the guy that discovered that it was an insecticide, and he actually got a Nobel Prize for the discovery that DDT was a good insecticide. It's like, okay. We thought it was really good because it was very effective at killing bugs. It wasn't until 1945 that it was actually introduced as an insecticide, and by 1962, the outcry had risen because of the effects to the environment. Silent Spring came out, Rachel Carson's book, and then it was banned in the United States in 1972. We continued to manufacture it until 1985 and ship it to other countries of the world. But that's reality. That's what we did. It's kind of hard once you get a product started to stop it, and even when you know it's bad. It's unfortunate. But the search continues for insecticides and herbicides. And chemical companies that made DDT were looking for new products, and eventually somebody discovered that, oh, we can make a really neat herbicide that can help us with our farming. We don't have to till anymore. All we have to do is spray the field with this stuff called Roundup, glyphosate, which was synthesized in 1970 and introduced in 1974 by Monsanto. By 1996, they had discovered that they could make transgenic corn that was resistant, actually soybeans were first, that were resistant to Roundup. And that made it even easier, because now I can spray the whole field just when, because Roundup acts on new growth, it has to be above the ground before it can work. They could spray all the plants, all the weeds, even the soybeans that were just emerging, and not have to worry about killing their soybeans, and just kill the weeds. And by 1998, then transgenic corn was produced that also was Roundup ready, and now there are many different Roundup ready crops. It makes it easier to do your farming, but it has some side effects that are pretty important for monarch butterflies. Here we see the edge effect, different edge effect, Bill, of Roundup used on a field. There are no plants next to the corn. All the weeds that would normally be there, including milkweed that would normally be surrounding the cornfields, just aren't there. And with no plants, we have no insects. No insects, we're not going to have birds either. So this is kind of a tough situation. This shows the amount of Roundup that is used by year, and you can see the dramatic. Well, actually, that's not Roundup. That's Roundup ready crops, and we're seeing very huge growth in Roundup ready crops. This shot shows the estimated use of glyphosate, of Roundup, in the United States. And you'll notice that great big patch in the center of the United States, the breadbasket of the world. A lot of Roundup, right? A lot of Roundup. Unfortunately, that also happens to be that red outlined area is where most of the monarchs come from, right? The numbers that come out of Mexico are limited, and the population increases, and the biggest place where they grow is here. So we've got an overlap of a lot of glyphosate use and where the monarchs come from. So it really shouldn't be a surprise to us that monarch numbers are going down, because we've reduced their habitat, we've reduced the places where they can lay their eggs and grow successfully. This has not been updated. This year, that last bar is about 14% down from there. Those numbers just came out about a week ago, and I didn't update this slide, unfortunately. All of those butterflies, whether they're monarchs or Carnier blues or whatever, have a limited percentage that make it to maturity. And a lot of them are food for birds, right? So if you don't have them, you can't feed birds. This particular slide is from Doug Ptolemy. He wrote a book that I have on the table, and he graciously allowed me to use this slide. He talks a lot about, in his talks, talks a lot about the importance of insects, that basically the preferred food for birds when they're feeding their young is caterpillars. Why? Lots of protein, very healthy food, right? If you don't have those caterpillars, right? You don't have those caterpillars, what you end up with is little birds with their mouths open. And that's certainly not what we want. This is a cover of Doug Ptolemy's book. I encourage you to take a look at it. It's one of the finest books on trying to restore natural areas. problem that we have is that we don't necessarily think about what we need to support nature. This is the suburban desert called grass. It doesn't feed much. About the only thing that I can be sure is going to be living in my grass, in my yard, is Japanese beetle larvae. Right? I'm pretty much assured that I'm going to have Japanese beetle larvae. But anything else? Not so much. This I found interesting. I was looking around for information. Top crop in Wisconsin, according to this site, was lawn. Lawn, yes, lawn. Okay. I believe it. We know that that's not really what we want. Instead, I suggest something that looks more like this. This is flowers along Lake Menominee in Menominee, Wisconsin. That's what I'd like my yard to look like. I'm still trying to convince my wife that I can convert a lot of the lawn into that, but anyway, this finishes my talk. I do have some more shots that I can show you, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you have. Penny, where are you? There you are. Penny started a project called the Monarch Encouragement Project, and we've gotten some funding from the Encourage Foundation to support planting and conversion of some grass areas in the Wisconsin Rapids area. And if you're interested in participating in some small way or large way, we're doing a plant sale. We've got areas that need attention, and anyone that wants to participate in any way from the Wisconsin Rapids area, please talk to Penny. Did everybody see where Penny is? She's over here. Okay, questions?
Questions from Richard?
Yes, Penny?
What is the association between ants and butterflies?
Well, it's not all butterflies, but many of the blue species, the ants will carry the larva into their nest to protect them. I'm not sure why the ants do that. I asked one time and he didn't answer me. He just looked at me like kind of funny and just waggled his antenna. Yeah.
Are there only certain kinds of ants that will do that, or do red ants do that?
I don't think red ants do. I'm not a particular fan of red ants, but maybe somebody else knows.
You had mentioned your project on the OE parasites. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I can tell you about the project. One of the graduates from the program at University of Minnesota, St. Paul, the Monarch Lab is up there, went to the University of Georgia and started the Monarch Health Project. And her interest was understanding the impact of OE. It's a big long word that I can't remember. But if you're interested more in it, I can find more information for you. But if you just go to OE, Google OE, you'll be able to find it. The parasite is transmitted on the outside of the adult butterfly. And so what I do when I go out to evaluate samples, I'll catch males and females and bring them back home, and then I do a tape test where I apply tape to the abdomen of the butterfly and then fix the tape onto a card. And under the microscope you can see if there are the spores of the OE parasite on the scales. You need about a 100-power microscope to see them, but then I send those samples back to the University of Georgia.
So this is a fungus?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's a fungus. They call it an obligate parasite. It grows inside the gut of the butterfly. And normally it's transmitted to the egg when the female lays the egg. And then when the caterpillar comes out of the egg, the first thing it does is it eats the corium of the egg, and then it ingests the spore. And after that, then it just grows in its body and multiplies. Usually does not kill the insect, but it can if it's really a bad infection. Did that answer your question? That's not enough, maybe.
I was wondering,
Yes, Frenchie?
we know that ants will sometimes suck on aphids because the aphids are giving some dross, and the dross is what attracts the bees, and that would be another example where ants are actually farming aphids.
Farming aphids, and there may be a similar relationship with the caterpillar. I just don't know.
Something like that, you know.
There's got to be some reason, I just don't know what it is.
I'm going by bad memory, but there was an article in the Vietnam magazine regarding the beneficial effect of buffalo dung on counter blue butterfly. And I'm going by, again, I don't know all the details, but it was a positive relationship, foraging presumably for the army or wherever. But obviously lupin is a major plant in that buffalo pasture where we have a Santa wildlife area, but it's interesting that buffalo are also a benefit.
Buffalo dung. I wonder if the buffalo dung is a way to spread the seeds of the lupin.
Yeah.
Do buffalo eat lupin?
Yeah, my wife says fertilizing.
Yeah, fertilizing it.
Thank you.
Spreading and fertilizing, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's give a big round of applause
Yeah.
for Richard.